Donald Trump has claimed God spared his life after an assassin's bullet pierced one of his ears.
The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again.
That statement stopped millions in their tracks. It wasn't just about survival. It was about divine intervention, or so he believed. But could this truly be the case? Could God have preserved Trump's life for a specific purpose, much like he did with figures in the Bible? Let's talk about Esther, a woman chosen by God to save her people. She was just a young Jewish girl who became Queen of Persia. But her position wasn't random. When her people faced annihilation, Esther's uncle Mordecai asked her a piercing question. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Esther 4:14. Esther's story reminds us that God often works through unlikely people to accomplish his purposes. Could Trump, a man with a controversial past, also be part of a divine plan? Here's something that might shock you. The Bible is full of flawed individuals whom God used in extraordinary ways. Take King David, for example. He was an adulterer and a murderer, yet he was called a man after God's own heart. David united Israel, wrote many psalms, and established a legacy that led to Jesus. God doesn't call the perfect. He perfects the called. So, if you're wondering why God would use someone like Trump, you're not alone. But perhaps that's the point. God's plans often defy human logic. Now let's dig deeper. In the book of Judges, we meet Samson, a man with supernatural strength. Samson was impulsive, rebellious, and often selfish, but God used him to deliver Israel from the Philistines. Despite his flaws, Samson's story proves that God can use anyone, even those we least expect, to fulfill his will. Is it possible that Trump's leadership, polarizing and unconventional as it may be, is part of a greater narrative? Let's not forget the Apostle Paul, once known as Saul, who persecuted Christians. He was literally hunting down believers when God stopped him on the road to Damascus. In Acts 9:15, God said of Paul, "This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings, and to the people of Israel." Paul's transformation from persecutor to preacher shocked everyone. It's a powerful reminder that God often uses people who seem least qualified. But here's where things get even more fascinating. Throughout history, God has used rulers and leaders, even those outside of his covenant people, to accomplish his purposes. Consider Cyrus the Great, a pagan king of Persia. Isaiah 45:1 refers to Cyrus as God's anointed, saying, "I will go before you and will level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron." Cyrus wasn't Jewish, yet he allowed the Israelites to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Could Trump's presidency, despite its controversies, be another example of God working through unexpected leaders? Think about this. Trump's presidency ushered in significant shifts, from economic policies to international relations. Some hailed these changes as progress. Others viewed them as divisive. But the Bible tells us that God's ways are higher than ours. Isaiah 55:8-9. Could it be that Trump's polarizing actions are part of a divine plan we're too close to fully understand? Now, let's address the so-called elephant in the room. Trump's character and past have drawn sharp criticism. But isn't that exactly what makes this question so compelling? If God can use someone as flawed as David or as ruthless as Saul, why not Trump? It's not about endorsing every decision he's made. It's about acknowledging that God's grace and purpose often extend beyond human comprehension. Here's where the emotional connection comes in. How often do we feel unworthy? How often do we question whether God could use us, given our flaws and failures? Trump's story, whether or not you agree with his politics, challenges us to consider this. If God can use him, he can use anyone. Yes, even you. Let's shift gears and talk about providence. In Genesis 50:20, Joseph told his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's life was full of betrayal and hardship, yet God used those trials for a greater purpose. Could Trump's controversial life, his scandals, his triumphs, and even his near-death experience be part of a similar tapestry? Here are 4 powerful bonus facts to consider. 1. God uses imperfect vessels. From Moses, who doubted his abilities, to Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, the Bible is filled with stories of flawed people fulfilling God's will. 2. God's plans often defy logic. In 1 Corinthians 1:27, Paul writes, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong." This verse challenges us to see beyond human judgment. 3. Leadership and divine purpose. Romans 13:1 reminds us, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established." Could Trump's presidency be part of God's establishment? 4. Redemption is always possible. In Ezekiel 36:26, God promises, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you." This underscores the idea that no one is beyond God's reach. So, was Donald Trump saved for such a time as this? We may never know for certain. But his story forces us to wrestle with profound questions about God's sovereignty, grace, and purpose. If nothing else, it's a reminder that God's plans often unfold in ways that surprise us. And here's the takeaway. Whether or not you believe Trump's claim, his story challenges us to look at our own lives. Are we open to the possibility that God could use us, flaws and all? Are we willing to step into the roles he's called us to, even when we feel unworthy? Perhaps just like Esther, David, or even Trump, we've been placed here for such a time as this. Let's end with this question. If God's grace is big enough for someone like Donald Trump, what does that say about what he can do in your life? Please subscribe to our channel today if you haven't already done so. You can also check out other videos on this channel.